the Reddit world, or ask me anything. We can ask us anything. We're going to be on here for a few minutes out there. And hey, Don, let me ask you, dude, how's your day going?
It's going well. It's been a nice day.
You've
How
been
has your day been?
Well, I've been working on the Kickstarter program that we're going to start there. It is now at Which Starter. It'll be actually it is called. Uh, we're going to do it witchstarter.com so that you can go ahead and be able to do that. Uh, by this time tomorrow night, it should be running and hopefully doing okay.
Yes, indeed.
Join us tomorrow at 8 o'clock tomorrow for talking about it. Um, so you've been working on pictures and tiles and things like that.
Yeah, I've been making tiles for season 2 programming.
Absolutely. So that actually was really pretty pictures, and we will
Thank
show
you.
those to soon. Um, and so let me go ahead. And so one of the first questions I got earlier today is, it's a redundant question. We've seen it before, and I was like, okay. So do you believe in ghosts,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
what do you think they are?
Well, those are two questions. And the first answer is absolutely. The second question is we have to remember different people have different understandings of the word ghost.
Hmm.
Everyone is not going to have the same definition. So I'll give my definition. I understand a ghost as being part of the soul that is trapped in the life that has ended and has not been able to cross over. It's usually trapped by some sort of traumatic experience or emotion, and that's what you see ghosts around. Sometimes that emotion is fear, sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's regret, sometimes it's concern. But that part of that soul cannot move forward. And I don't know that it's more than a part of the soul's energy. And for the part of the soul that goes on and reincarnates, it's part of the shadow. A spirit, on the other hand, is when the soul has completely crossed over after death. And they behave very differently. They are independent entities that behave just like we do. Um, Whereas a ghost is almost like a recording of that traumatic incident. It's in the same place, it repeats the same things. It's that thing that it can't get past, the thing that's blocked its energy. So, yes, I believe in ghosts, but when I do ancestor work, for example, I'm not working with ghosts, I'm working with spirits, and there's an important distinction between them. So, that would be my answer to that one.
That's a perfectly great answer. Uh, so I've been seeing that. So there was another question that was that: do you believe that spirits can affect machinery? It says electronics.
Mhm.
Do you believe that
Absolutely.
spirits can affect electronics? Where a machine came from? Oh, okay. Uh,
I've seen examples of spirits affecting physical things, and I don't see any reason they wouldn't be able to affect electronics. One of the famous examples of that, some people have received phone calls from deceased relatives where they're certain they've recognized the voice. And this is kind of a classic example of an interaction between spirit and technology. And although I did not personally experience that, a member of my family did, and was quite certain it was my grandmother. It certainly sounded like her. Um, but they're not like fully developed conversations as a rule. There are a lot of other things, photographs moving, objects moving. If they can do that, then they can certainly affect technology.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's an interesting question. Are you planning to do your vlogs again? If those are the video vlogs that you did for over 10 years.
Yes, I am, but I don't have a time frame for that.
Hmm.
But I do believe I will end up returning to it.
Oh, good. And then we have Margarita Brown. Thank you very much, Marguerite.
Yes,
Uh,
indeed.
and there she goes. What is the best way to ask your ancestors for help and guidance?
With a pure heart. Um, I don't know that there's one way that's better than another. because they are there and they will listen if you speak to them. And if you speak to them with a pure heart and an open mind, I think you will get your answer. Now, if you want to develop an ongoing communication, pardon me, the way that I recommend to do that is to work with it daily and to develop it by sitting for that communication about 15 minutes a day. And what you do is you speak to your ancestors, maybe you make an offering, your spirit guides, as the case may be. Sometimes ancestors are spirit guides, sometimes spirit guides are not ancestors. It depends. But you speak to them, um, you tell them that the relationship is important and you want to strengthen it and you want them to tell you what you need to know. It's good to light a candle. The candle gives extra energy, especially when you're first beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to quiet your mind. But you have to understand what that means. You can never still your mind. Your mind is always going to be working, especially, for example, I'm a Gemini. My mind will not just shut off. But you can learn to still it. But what happens is that if a thought comes in, you just let it go through. You don't attach to it. And when you're looking for communication and you're specifically doing that, then you would write down what comes through your mind, but you still don't react to it. You just let it go through. And if you do that, you'll find you're receiving messages relatively quickly.
There you
And it's
go.
very important not to judge them as you're bringing them through. That will shut the process down completely. You have to wait until you're done to actually look at what you've got and worry about what it was. And when you begin, it may not be all that clear, but it will become clear relatively soon.
There you go. She says, "Thank you so much."
You're
All
very
right.
welcome, Margarita.
All right. So, from the weird field of the Psychic Army page, they're asking, "Do you believe?" It's not what they're saying. Are there Chinese psychic spies?
Probably. I mean, the remote viewing is a thing. We have instructions for it in third degree.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I assume, what we're talking about. You know, if you can do a reading for someone miles away from you, you can also see them through the astral. So I'd be surprised if there are not. I'm sure there are Russian ones, and I'd be surprised if we don't have our own. Um, because it's a normal enough human function to be able to sense things psychically at a distance. So why would they not be using it?
There you go. I think that is from the Chinese weather balloon incident or surveillance balloon or whatever we want to call it.
I'm sure it is, but it's still a good question because a lot of times it's not unusual that you'll find the same person who insists that none of these psychic things are real is also using it themselves for their own purposes,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly when we're talking about governments and institutions. So yeah,
Yeah.
I do think that is a thing.
So I do too. I think that there is, if there's anything, I think that the idea of psychic research out there is something they conducted. I just don't think it's ever gotten dependable enough.
No, I would agree with that too. I don't think it's all that highly developed, but
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's there.
Right. Well, it's like anything. We think we can keep secrets. Yes, the government have these top secret plans,
Yeah.
and secrets, and they're leaking them out constantly. Secret military bases on the other side of the moon. Though anyone with a telescope or anyone with a binoculars can see the surface of the moon, unless of
Yep.
course it's a simulation. They're actually living behind that one. Um, Mars,
Hmm.
moon, everything else. I mean, we can see a lot of this stuff. I mean, the average person could.
Hmm.
Um, so I always find that very a fascinating concept.
Well,
But
the other thing is that people have a lot of conspiracy theories about organizations that are basically rather inept
hmm
and that
well,
involve far too many people
hmm
to really be able to keep a lot of secrets.
yeah.
I mean, if you look back on the history of the 20th century, most of the big
Mm.
scandalous secrets that came out later, people knew about at the time. They just didn't credit them,
And I
or they
get
didn't
that.
care. Yeah.
It's like Chat GPT and all these sort of AI programs.
Mhm.
I mean, if there were a bigger AI program, and these are working really well, they would have said something. I mean, I bet there are better programs,
Oh, I'm sure.
but they're not planning to keep them hidden from us. There is, I don't, as
I
much
don't
as I
see that
hate to,
there's any percentage in it for them.
no, especially that they learned that, well, as much as we thought we'd hate it, we love it. Like,
Yeah.
oh, give us more.
We have to
Um,
remember a lot of the world works on merchandising.
hmm
And, there's a saying, follow the money. And for a lot of things, it is quite accurate.
hmm
Um, and a Machiavellian scheme that isn't making someone money somewhere is probably not actually happening,
right.
because they would want that motivation.
hmm
There may be exceptions. I'm not saying there aren't, but I think that's the thing that's missing in a lot of conspiracy theories. The practical reason why someone would do such a thing.
hmm
And they think, oh, so they would have power over us. Well, most people aren't really worth having power over in that sense.
Now, my own experiences aside, and I have met people who have claimed to be part of government experiments or have been
Mhm.
part of government experiments. And I'm not sure if during the time that they were testing LSD on people and all the things that I was not part of a government experiment for a little while.
Mhm.
But that's a different story. Mhm.
With a few exceptions, most of the people that I have met
Mhm.
who claimed that they had been part of a government experiment, with some strategic exceptions,
Mhm.
had nothing so great about them that they would have been worth experimenting on.
Mhm.
Now, I have known some exceptions to that,
Right.
but I've known a lot of people who basically were bragging about how they had been involved in that sort of thing, and they had nothing.
Mhm.
They had no juice to speak of. They had no special skills to speak of. I don't see why they would have been involved.
Right.
Now, I have also met some people who are highly talented, who I could easily believe were involved in such a thing, but they're far, far fewer.
I
Because
can see
let's
that
face it,
too.
if you're going to do a big Machiavellian experiment, you want people who can actually do it.
Yeah. And people are, the world is two screens. Yes. Um, no, we have just had our Kickstarter campaign that we've been working all day. Our commercial is actually done.
Oh, yay! I'm glad to hear that.
I'm actually glad to hear that too.
Now, one of the things about that commercial is it does make use of the tiles we were describing.
Mhm.
And if people follow our media, they'll know right away what the tiles are. They are the advertisements for the different shows,
Mhm.
and we try to make them colorful and interesting.
All right. Really? So, do love charms? I guess this is Valentine's Day coming up.
Well, yes, it is.
Do love charms really work? That's an open question.
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that question that isn't obvious on the start, because there's the whole question about when it is appropriate to use such a thing.
Mhm.
The general answer is that it's appropriate to do magic to draw the best possible love to yourself, or to draw love to yourself, but not to draw a specific person. Now, do they work? Well, yes, they certainly can. And that's one of the reasons you don't do a particular person, because you just might find out you didn't really want that person after all. And you might find you're stuck with them. Um, because once you've done it, it's not necessarily so easy to step out of it. I can think of a person who I know tried to do love magic on me and had some success, because I actually did feel love for the person. But I also recognized it was a bad relationship and left it. But they were still obsessed with me years after the fact because their love charm was holding them stronger than it had held me. Um, so I recommend being very careful.
Mhm.
Um, and in fact, avoiding doing that sort of thing in the direction of specific people at all. But love itself, absolutely.
That's it. Um, just for people's references, I guess people, what is a freeze spell? Where I guess it's, I think they mean a freeze spell. I guess
Oh, freeze.
freeze. Yes, freeze spell. I guess a binding spell. I guess.
Bearing in mind that it could mean different things to different people.
Hmm.
Generally, I think what they're referring to is where you try to stop a potentially harmful situation from unfolding in a harmful manner by literally creating a spell that is frozen, usually using water. The spell might be written and put in the water, put in the freezer, and frozen. And the situation should not go forward. And that's another thing that, ethically speaking, you must be careful with. And it can be very effective.
I guess there's a lot of questions about hexes and curses in our community and where they're
Mhm.
appropriate and where they're not. Maybe at some point we need to kind of deal with that. But do you have like a casual statement on that? I mean, because you have the harm none idea.
Well, as a Corellian, my understanding of the concept of harm none is not to do unprovoked or egregious damage. If you look at the meaning of the word harm historically, um, it doesn't cover a lot of things people try to extend it to. Um, I once had someone try to tell me harm none meant they could never hurt anyone's feelings, which, you hurt people's feelings just by being alive, particularly as a pagan. There are um, lots of conservative Christians out there whose feelings are hurt that we exist. If that's what harm none meant, it would be a very bad thing. But unprovoked or egregious damage is something that everyone can live within. And I think that really is a good standard. And it's the same thing that hopefully your mother taught you before sending you to school. Um, I think the phrase is "Don't start none, won't be none." Um, and if you apply the basic rules that you might have applied in kindergarten, I think you will be fine in terms of interacting with people. The problem is we get very emotional and we don't step back from our emotions. And we often don't realize that sometimes those mistakes and wrong turns are very important to us later. They aren't necessarily the
Mhm.
bad things we try to make them into. But as far as the hexing and the cursing goes, I do not encourage it as a rule.
There you go. Um,
Well, if you ask yourself, when you were little and you thought of a wise person, are those the qualities you were thinking of? Are you thinking of someone who's hexing all their enemies? I certainly wouldn't have associated that with the idea of a wise person or a magical person.
mhm.
I would have associated that with a badly behaved toddler. Um, and so I would say that just because one comes from one of the many pagan religions doesn't mean that being a good person is that different an idea from any other religion on earth.
So we're gonna take one last question, and this one is okay. I say it. Any ideas on why for is it why my feet, hands, and shoulders blades vibrate? It's a pretty weird feeling. First of all, we are not medical people, so that if this is actually a medical condition, please check it with your doctors. We cannot give out medical advice, so please take all of our metaphysical and spiritual advice with a grain of that. If anything is truly wrong, you should see a medical doctor.
Well, yes.
Having said that, do you have any ideas of what they may be thinking about?
Well, there are a lot of variables involved in that question, and the biggest one is when does the person feel that vibration? But generally, I would say that's the kind of feeling that you would have in association with energy flowing through you and wanting to be used. Um,
Mhm.
Assuming that it's not a medical something,
Mhm.
assuming that it's not, and if that were the case, I would expect it to be intermittent and in situations where one would use energy, and perhaps they simply haven't learned to channel it completely yet. And I would recommend taking up energy work and learning more about it. And I think that they will find that that will cease to be an issue,
Mhm.
assuming those conditions.
Yep.
But when a person does Reiki, for example, they physically feel that energy. When I do energy healing, which I don't tend to use, well, I sometimes use the Reiki technique, but it's not what I was initially taught. But you physically feel that energy. When you do channeling, you physically feel that energy. And vibration is one of the things that you could feel.
And there you go. So, yep. Um, so
And I
it's
see
it,
that they remark it's not uncomfortable or painful, which
mm,
would rather incline me to say that, yes, that's what this is.
mhm.
Because I wouldn't expect that feeling from energy moving through you to be painful, as a rule.
Unless you're in a storm like the one behind me. Uh,
Well, one of the things I found during my many years of training was that there were a lot of things that were done. We might call them chakra adjustments, we might call them energetic adjustments. Some of those were less than comfortable. Very important, but not always comfortable, but they were a rarity, and they were not the normal feeling.
mhm.
Um,
And there you go. So we're gonna call. Let's get, this was a very brief night because we have so much that happened. Look up witchstarter.com, and we're gonna be back tomorrow night. And so with that, I think we're gonna call a little early tonight.
Very
Uh,
good.
and
Thank
why
you,
don't you?
everyone who's been here.
And please, let's end it with it as we always do with a prayer from Reverend Don himself.
Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, help us to live up to our highest potentials and to be all that we can be in our lives. Help us to gather the fruits of our efforts and to see the messages of Spirit before us. Help us as we go forward to see clearly where we are going and why. And when we have felt that we have made mistakes or taken detours, let us see what we gain from those as we go forward. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you for this and for your continued presence in our lives. And may you blessed be. And may you blessed be until next time.